With Minnesota's
Must be
recent
about
legalization.
beverages.
Oh, this one's not. This one is not, believe it or not. All right, so this one is all about social equity. And with Minnesota's recent legalization efforts, those chosen among the 1,800 pre-applications for social equity will have a head start when Minnesota issues licenses, likely next year. Late last year, Minnesota became the 23rd U.S. state to legalize adult use.
Can help me?
What's that?
Go ahead. Proceed.
Right.
Just wasn't on
Minnesota
here.
became the 23rd state, U.S. state to legalize adult use cannabis with a last-minute push to close out 2023. And now the race is on to lock in licensing as 1,800 social equity pre-applications have been submitted to the state's Office of Cannabis Management by applicants looking to get a head start on the process, which will most likely commence sometime early next year. But there seems to be a major issue with over half of the applicants. Less than half are Minnesota residents. The Minnesota State Tribune's Brooks Johnson reported this morning on his state becoming the latest in a troubling social equity trend, but taking a different spin on it. In their efforts to do right by individuals and communities most negatively impacted by the war on drugs. For the article, more than half the early social equity applicants vying to be first in line to receive Minnesota cannabis licenses live in other states, with the OCM receiving more than 1,800 pre-applications this summer from around the country. Just 802, or 44%, came from Minnesota residents. The weird thing about this one is Minnesota state law does not require applicants to live in the state. In an effort to get ahead of the infamous Jensen lawsuits that have plagued every nascent market since the white couple lost out on their own bid to win a license years ago to more qualified equity applicants in their own their own hometown of Pasadena, California, the land of 10,000 lakes, true to Minnesota form, decided to take a different route, where all social equity applicants who clear an initial review will have equal treatment in the lottery drawing this fall that will determine who wins license pre-approvals. Carol Moss, a cannabis industry attorney and member of the State Cannabis Advisory Council, said in the article that they knew they couldn't keep out-of-state parties out because that has been deemed unconstitutional in other states. We knew out-of-state people were going to come in, so it didn't take some of us by surprise. The article revealed about 44% of the 1,817 applicants for the first round of cannabis business licenses listed a Minnesota address. Most of them are from the metro area, but also cover nearly every area of the state. Most applicants were from outside of the state, with more than 280 applications from California and Arizona alone. Still, there remains an inherent tension between those building a homegrown industry and the expected flood of outsiders, all hoping to get a piece of what is expected to be a $1.5 billion market by the end of the decade. We were seeing a lot of last-minute deals being made with social equity applicants, and we're trying to make sure there wasn't anything predatory going on, Moss said. After legalizing marijuana in 2023, the Minnesota legislature passed a measure this spring that allows certain applicants to pre-apply so that they can be ready to receive licenses as soon as the Office of Cannabis Management is able to issue them. Social equity applicants can include those convicted of marijuana crimes and their relatives, military veterans, those who've lived in areas of high rates of cannabis enforcement and/or poverty, and small farmers. Johnson said that the pre-approval is meant to put social equity applicants on equal footing with well-funded entrepreneurs who might have an easier time navigating the regulatory process. Those who win the pre-approval lottery will be able to go to investors, landlords, and local governments with certainty needed to line up the money and approvals needed to start businesses as the state issues full licenses. The state's they're trying. Everybody else tried to do it too, but we'll see what Minnesota happens. The state's cannabis agency recently issued a first draft of its rules and expects to finalize them later this year, which are key steps needed before the state's issuing any licenses and dispensaries can open. However, grow operations chosen in the lottery will be able to start as soon as they win pre-approval. Coupled with cannabis grown on reservations, Johnson says that the early cultivators could give the new industry a stable supply. and help move consumers out of the illicit market as dispensaries open. Something it seems that they've learned by watching New York fail to do so in both of those categories. There are a total of 282 licenses available in the pre-approval lottery, including 100 micro businesses, 25 meso businesses, and 38 retailer licenses up for grabs in the first round. Micro businesses and meso businesses allow the licensees to both grow and sell cannabis. Johnson then listed a breakdown of Minnesota versus other U.S. applications by percentage of applications received. In respect to time, I will not be listing them all. Y'all can head to high9news.com for that info and also a link to the original article. But of the 9 types of licenses that are out there, the only ones with more Minnesotans applying were for micro business at 63%, transport 91%, wholesaler 89%, and testing facilities 100%. All but the first pretty much needing the applicants to already be firmly footed within the state. Johnson said that among the out-of-state applicants, many come from states that have existing adult use cannabis markets. And there were a few notable surprises within that data. Arizona had the biggest individual state presence with more than 180 applications using Arizona addresses on their entries, and hundreds most equally came from Illinois, Missouri, California, and Maryland. Very curiously, there were 29 applications for micro businesses and meso business licenses from a small town in Arkansas called Eudora. Another round of pre-applications is said by the OCM to open this fall. It's too early for me to pass definitive positive or negative judgment on Minnesota for how they're handling equity licensure. But on one hand, it's diluting the state's ability to address its own constituents' needs. But on the other, it's renewed opportunities for those who were not able to participate in their own state markets for whatever reason that might have been. So we'll see how things shake out. Unfortunately, I did not have time to dig deeper this morning into the Eudora, Arkansas angle before I wrote, but I promise I will be following the money on that one and would not be surprised if it had some kind of connection to the $19,000 lectern purchased by Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, a la Podium Gate. We shall see. I'm Rico Lamitte, the dopest dad on the street for High at 9 News. What do y'all think about these social equity numbers, these license applications out in Minnesota?
I mean, Minnesota, bro. You think they're really going to do it better than anybody else has done it?
I don't know, man. They have 56% of the licensees of the applications came in from out of state.
Yeah, I'm sure that they did. I mean, ever since that ruling that you can be out of state and still qualify. I mean, all of those people that qualified in any municipality basically can just, copy paste.
I mean, do you think that there's just not that big of an interest in the state of Minnesota? They don't have enough applicants for the number of licenses. So
I think they don't have enough resources for people in that state to be able to that would know how to qualify to get through that whole process.
Wouldn't it make more sense to give them technical assistance then?
I'm for that. I'm not opposed to that. Not opposed to that at all. Yarrow, can you hear us?
Yes, microphone check 1 2 1 2.
All right. We saw you were having a little problems going in and out.
He couldn't find his phone book to sit on.
I'm a technical genius. I restarted everything 4 times in a row and I fixed it. So call me for tech support because that's the only gift and trick I've got in that arena. On to this article. It's interesting, this notion of local versus non-local participants. When they first started throwing up these programs and I qualified, I kind of like the local thing because I qualified, right? Our benefits shade our perspective sometimes. And then I started thinking about it with the New York stuff, and people who are justice involved doesn't mean that they caught a case in New York. People who grew up in New York doesn't mean they stayed in the state of New York their whole life. And so I think if I thought about this industry maturing, there's a lot of know-how from outside of some of these markets. And so being so insular and saying, well, you got to live in this area for this many years, and if you don't get this, might not be the best way to grow the industry and to import talent. So I'm kind of on the fence. See how it plays out.
It's interesting, right?
I'm on the fence till I see the list. I want to see if the usual suspects who are going ahead and throwing themselves on social equity licenses in every other freaking state but aren't social equity applicants are on that list, because I bet they are. I was actually shocked to see some people I know got plenty of money on LA's recent list, and I'm like, how did you finagle Bagel and lie your ass off like that, sir?
Well, since you mentioned Bagel, I feel like I get to be the first one to respond. It's because not all these
Why is that, Yarrow?
I got bagels in my DNA.
Oh boy.
So I think part of the reason is because there's still a robust conversation about whether these programs should be mean tested based on income, or whether the qualifying factor should be justice involved, given the disproportionate number of arrests and convictions of people of color and communities of poverty. And so we penalize the person who is able to overcome those issues and have oversized financial success in their adult life if we say, well, you're just not poor enough, and not having enough money doesn't necessarily make you qualified to run a business either. So for me, I think the means testing is an interesting conversation around policy that may or may not be in some of these programs, but I don't necessarily think that somebody should be penalized for having done well if they qualify with all the other criteria.
I can completely agree with the mini bagel, but what I'm going to say here is that's not in this instance what I'm necessarily speaking of. I'm talking about the people who shouldn't qualify for social equity, period. Like, if you got caught with a joint, I'm sorry, that's not social equity qualification to me. And so I think that the means is definitely an interesting question. I think that looks more at, can you prove that you were devastated by the prohibition of cannabis at some point in your life? Maybe you're not broke now, and I think that's amazing. Like, I don't want to see anybody failing and struggling and having to struggle to fit.
On that one, though, I mean, that I believe that that's the downfall of social equity as we've seen it so far, is so many people define it differently. And the way that they were hurt by the war on drugs is always more detrimental than the next person's, and they're paying on it too. So I mean, just like Yarrow, like I'm torn on this one. Like, I think it's interesting that they're taking a very different path towards it, but it'll be interesting to see that. Just like you, like I do believe that the usual suspects are going to be on that list, but hopefully some of the folks that have missed out in other states, like I said earlier, they get a second chance here.
I wonder if anyone from Pasadena applied.
You know they're in it.
Greedy little gremlins.
You know for a fact the Jensens are on that shit.
Keeping up with the Jensens.
Why. I mean, that's why they did it. There's exactly why they did it this way, to get ahead of those lawsuits. There's going to be a bunch of people that are suing. They're doing it in other states. You know what? We're going to get ahead of that, and we're going to say it's open season. Come on up.
And the Jensens weren't even created. Who was the first guy that did it? It was the guy that sued New York, and he also sued the LA social equity program.
That's the Jensens.
No. There was somebody before them. It was one single guy, and he's from like Michigan.
I don't know. Stone, you have any thoughts on this before we move on?
It's a different path. Is it the right one? I don't know. Wait and see, like everybody else. Someday, one of these states is going to get it right.
Hope none of you guys are holding your breath for this, and we're going to be right back after this commercial break.
Burn it down.